The locomotive wheezed its final breath as it pulled into Silver Creek Station. 3 days late and covered in a thick coat of winter's spite. Steam hissed between the wheels, mixing with the falling snow that had been coming down steady since dawn. Margaret Maggie Rowe pressed her face against the frost-covered window, watching the small town materialize through the white curtain of weather. She'd waited 6 months for this moment. 6 months of letters from Owen Darby, each one promising a new life, a fresh start, a place where her height wouldn't matter, where being 5 feet and 11 inches wouldn't make her that peculiar Rowe girl anymore. Her gloved fingers found the bundle of letters in her coat pocket, their edges worn soft from reading. The conductor's voice cracked through the car. "Silver Creek, end of the line." Maggie stood, her head nearly brushing the luggage rack above. A child across the aisle stared up at her with wide eyes, tugging on his mother's sleeve. The woman glanced up, then quickly away, pulling her son closer. Maggie had grown used to such reactions, but today it stung more than usual. Today was supposed to be different. She gathered her carpet bag and her mother's old trunk, the leather straps cutting into her palms even through her gloves. The train car emptied around her, passengers flowing past like water around a stone. When she finally descended the iron steps onto the platform, the cold hit her like a slap. Silver Creek Station was smaller than she'd imagined. A wooden building with peeling yellow paint, icicles hanging from the eaves like teeth. Beyond it, the town sprawled in a rough line along the main street. False-fronted buildings huddled together against the Wyoming winter. Smoke rose from chimneys in straight lines, the air too cold for wind. Maggie scanned the platform. A few ranch hands loading supplies. A woman with 2 small children hurrying toward a waiting wagon. An old man sleeping on a bench, his beard white with frost. But no Owen Darby. No man matching the description from his letters. Medium height, dark hair, owner of the Double D Ranch north of town. She waited. Snow accumulated on her shoulders, on the brim of her traveling hat. Her feet grew numb in her boots. The station master emerged from his office, a grizzled man with suspicious eyes. "Help you, miss. I'm looking for Mr. Owen Darby. He was supposed to meet me." The station master's expression shifted, something between pity and amusement flickering across his weathered face. "Owen Darby, well now, that's interesting. When were you expecting him?" "Today. I've just arrived from Missouri." "Today?" He scratched his jaw. "You're 2 days late, miss. That storm that rolled through shut down the rail line." "Yes, I know, but surely he would understand. Owen Darby ain't much for waiting, especially not in weather like this." The station master glanced at her height, then at her plain traveling dress, her worn boots. "You're the mail-order bride." Then, heat flooded Maggie's cheeks despite the cold. "Mr. Darby and I have been corresponding. He invited me to come west." "That so?" The man's smile wasn't kind. "Well, might be you'll find him at the Buckhorn Saloon, or might be you won't. Owen's got his own way of doing things." He retreated to his warm office, leaving Maggie alone on the platform. The town stretched before her, alien and unwelcoming. She'd sold everything to buy the train ticket, her job at the millinery shop, given up, her small room above Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, rented to another girl, all for the promise in Owen's letters. She hefted her trunk and started walking. Main Street was a river of mud and slush, wooden walkways on either side trying to keep pedestrians above the muck. Maggie struggled with her luggage, her height making her conspicuous among the bundled figures hurrying past. She caught fragments of conversation, saw the quick glances, the nudges. Lord almighty, look at the size of her. Must be near 6 feet. Owen's woman, I heard tell. The Buckhorn Saloon squatted mid-block, warm light spilling from its windows. Maggie hesitated at the doors. Respectable women didn't enter saloons. But then again, respectable women didn't travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. She pushed through. The heat hit her first, then the smell, tobacco, whiskey, Wet wool, and underneath it all, the sharp tang of male sweat. Conversations died as she entered. Every eye in the place turned to her, taking in her height, her traveling clothes, the trunk she dragged behind her. Well, well. A woman's voice, whiskey rough and amused. You must be Owen's intended. The speaker leaned against the bar, red silk dress cut low, paint on her cheeks. One of the sporting women. She looked Maggie up and down with professional assessment. I'm looking for Mr. Darby, Maggie said, hating how her voice shook. Ain't we all, honey, ain't we all? The woman laughed, but there was sympathy in it. Charlie, you seen Owen today? The bartender, a mountain of a man with arms like ham hocks, shook his head. Not since Tuesday. Heard he was heading back to the Double D. Tuesday? The sporting woman's painted lips curved. That would be the day you were supposed to arrive. Wouldn't it before the storm? Maggie's hands tightened on her trunk handle. Perhaps I should go to his ranch. In this weather, it's 15 miles north, and the roads near impassable. The woman studied her with surprising kindness. You got any money, honey? Any place to stay? Mr. Darby said he would arrange everything. Someone snorted. Another man laughed outright. Maggie's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin up, spine straight. She'd been mocked before for her height, her angular features, her unfashionable figure. She could endure it again. The saloon doors banged open. For a wild moment, Maggie's heart leaped, but it wasn't Owen. A young ranch hand stomped in, shaking snow from his hat. Hey, Jesse, the bartender called. You just come from the Double D. Yeah, Charlie. Why? This lady's looking for Owen. Jesse's eyes found Maggie, widened slightly at her height, then filled with something worse than mockery, pity. Oh, you're the one from Missouri. Is Mr. Darby at his ranch? Maggie asked. Jesse shifted uncomfortably. Well, ma'am, he's there all right, but he said to tell you. The young man swallowed hard. He said the deal's off, said you coming late broke the agreement, said he's got no use for a woman who can't keep her word. The saloon went silent. Even the card game stopped. Maggie stood very still, feeling every eye upon her, feeling the weight of her height, her plainness, her foolishness in believing those letters. But the storm, she began. I'm just telling you what he said, ma'am. He was real specific about it. Said you'd missed your chance. Jessie looked miserable. I'm sorry. Maggie nodded once, a sharp jerk of her head. Thank you for telling me. She turned, dragging her trunk toward the door. The sporting woman caught her arm as she passed. Where you going, honey? I don't know. The words came out steady. Maggie was proud of that. There's a boarding house on 3rd Street. Mrs. Holloway's. She might have a room. Thank you. Maggie pushed back out into the cold. The snow fell heavier now, thick flakes that stuck to everything they touched. She stood on the wooden walkway, trunk at her feet, and looked up and down the street. Somewhere, Owen Darby sat warm by his fire, washing his hands of her as easily as writing a letter. She'd been called many things in her 28 years. Too tall, too plain, too sharp-tongued, too much and not enough all at once. But she'd never been called a liar, someone who couldn't keep her word. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Ma'am. She turned. A man stood in the doorway of Miller's General Store, tall enough that she didn't have to look down to meet his eyes. He wore a long duster over work clothes, a battered hat pulled low. His face was weathered but not old, marked by sun and wind into something that might have been handsome if she'd been the type to notice such things. You need help with that trunk. She almost said no. She'd learned long ago not to accept help, not to owe anyone anything. But the snow was falling fast, and Mrs. Holloway's boarding house seemed very far away. That's kind of you. He stepped forward, lifted the trunk easily. Where you headed? Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, if she has a room?" He studied her for a moment, and she braced for the usual comments about her height, the jokes, the stares. Instead, he simply nodded. "I'll walk you there. Streets get confusing in the snow." They walked in silence, the man carrying her trunk as if it weighed nothing. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't ask why she was alone in a strange town with all her worldly possessions. The snow muffled their footsteps, turned the world soft and quiet. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house was a narrow building squeezed between a laundry and a cobbler's shop. The man set Maggie's trunk on the porch and touched his hat brim. "Good luck to you, ma'am." "Wait," Maggie said. "I don't even know your name." "Carter," he said. "Lucian Carter. I run cattle west of town." "Margaret Rowe, Maggie." He nodded, started to turn away, then paused. "That business with Owen Darby, it wasn't right. What he done, man gives his word. He ought to keep it." Before Maggie could respond, he was gone, vanishing into the swirling snow. She stood on the porch, watching the place where he'd been, feeling something she couldn't quite name. Not quite hope, but maybe the absence of despair. She knocked on Mrs. Holloway's door. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing tall. She'd done it before. She could do it again. But Lord, she was tired of doing it alone. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house offered no comfort beyond four walls and a narrow bed that left Maggie's feet hanging over the edge. 3 days had passed since her arrival in Silver Creek. 3 days of dwindling funds and growing desperation. The widow Holloway demanded payment daily, cash in advance, and made it clear that charity cases weren't welcome. "I run a respectable establishment," she'd said, eyeing Maggie's height with disapproval. "No gentlemen callers after 8, no cooking in the rooms, and rent's due by noon or you're out." Maggie had pawned her mother's cameo brooch that morning, the last thing of value she owned besides her wedding dress, still packed in tissue paper, unworn and useless now. The pawnbroker, a ferret-faced man named Josiah Crane, had given her barely enough for another week's lodging. "Times are hard," he'd said, though the rings in his window suggested otherwise. Not much call for fancy jewelry in a cattle town. Now she walked Main Street in search of employment, her boots already worn thin from the boardwalk splinters. She'd tried the millinery shop first, thinking her experience might count for something. The owner, Mrs. Prudence Fairweather, had taken one look at her and shaken her head. "I'm sorry, dear, but you'd frighten away my customers. A woman of your stature, it's simply not suitable for delicate work." The dress shop had been no better, nor the hotel dining room, where the manager claimed she'd loom over the diners. Even the laundry, back-breaking work that no one wanted, had turned her away. "You'd have to stoop all day," the Chinese proprietor had said, not unkindly. "Bad for your back. Find something else." The afternoon sun was weak through the overcast sky when Maggie found herself standing outside the telegraph office. Through the window, she could see the operator bent over his key. She had enough money to send a message back to Missouri, to beg for help from someone, anyone, but who she'd burned every bridge coming west, so certain of her future with Owen Darby. "Miss Rowe." She turned. A man in a businessman's suit stood behind her, prosperous-looking with gold watch chain and polished boots. She didn't recognize him. "I'm Clarence Hartwell," he said, touching his hat brim. "I own several establishments in town. I heard about your situation." Something in the way he said situation made her skin crawl, but she nodded politely. "Mr. Hartwell, I might have employment for you." His eyes traveled up and down her height in a way that made her want to cross her arms over herself. "My entertainment establishment could use a woman of your unique proportions. The miners do like novelty." The entertainment establishment. She'd seen it on the far end of town. Red lanterns in the windows, piano music spilling out at all hours. Her stomach turned. Thank you, but no. His face hardened. Pride's a luxury you can't afford much longer. Miss Rowe, my offer stands when you get hungry enough. He walked away, leaving her shaking with anger and something else. Fear. Maybe because he was right. Her money would run out. And then what? She'd seen what happened to women with no options in towns like this. Miss Rowe. Another voice. She was getting tired of turning to see who wanted to gawk at the tall woman today. But this time, it was Jesse, the young ranch hand from the saloon. Ma'am, he said, shifting nervously. I got a message for you from Mr. Darby. Her heart lurched, hating itself for the hope that bloomed instantly. Oh, he wants to see you. Says to come out to the Double D tomorrow morning. Says maybe you can work something out. Work something out. The words tasted bitter. After leaving me stranded here, Jesse looked miserable. I'm just delivering the message, ma'am. He'll send a wagon for you at dawn, if you're willing. Maggie stood very still, weighing her options. Pride said no. Practical sense said she had no choice. The memory of Clarence Hartwell's oily smile decided her. I'll be ready. Jesse nodded and hurried away, clearly relieved to be done with his errand. Maggie walked slowly back to the boarding house, trying not to think about what Owen might want, what kind of arrangement he had in mind. Whatever it was, it had to be better than Hartwell's offer. It had to be. The next morning came cold and gray. Maggie dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a brown wool that had seen better days but was clean and pressed. She pinned her hair severely back, trying to minimize her height somehow, make herself less offensive to male pride. The wagon arrived as promised, driven by a taciturn older man who didn't speak beyond a grunt when she climbed aboard. The ride took 2 hours over roads made treacherous by frozen mud. The Double D Ranch, when it finally appeared, was impressive. A sprawling operation with multiple barns, a bunkhouse, and a main house that spoke of prosperity. Owen Darby waited on the porch. He was exactly as his letters had described. Medium height, dark hair, pleasant enough features. But his eyes, when they found her, were cold as the morning air. He didn't help her down from the wagon, didn't offer greeting, just watched as she climbed down awkwardly, her skirts catching on the wheel. Miss Rowe. Mr. Darby. They stood facing each other, the moment stretching taut between them. Finally, he spoke. You're taller than I expected. Your letters said that wouldn't matter. My letters said many things. He turned toward the house. Come inside. We need to discuss your situation. She followed him into a parlor that showed a woman's touch. Curtains at the windows, a rag rug on the floor, dried flowers in a vase, the ghost of the first Mrs. Darby, perhaps, dead these 5 years according to his letters. Sit. He gestured to a chair while taking his own behind a desk, establishing the dynamic immediately. Employer and supplicant. I'll be direct. Miss Rowe, you've put me in an awkward position. I've put you... I announced our engagement to the entire county, made preparations, told everyone I was bringing a bride from back east, and then you don't arrive. The train was delayed by the storm. Surely you heard. What I heard was that my bride couldn't be bothered to send word, couldn't be bothered to arrive on time. What kind of wife would such a woman make? Maggie bit back her first response, and her second. When she finally spoke, her voice was level. The rail lines were down. Mr. Darby, I couldn't have sent word if I'd wanted to. He waved this away. The point is, you've embarrassed me, made me look foolish. A man's reputation matters out here. Miss Rowe, mine has taken a blow. I fail to see how... However, he leaned back, studying her like livestock at auction. I'm prepared to be magnanimous. You can work here as housekeeper, room, board, and a small wage, in time. When you've proven yourself reliable, we might revisit the original arrangement. You want me to be your servant. I want you to prove you can be trusted. His smile was thin. Unless you have better options, I hear Clarence Hartwell's been sniffing around. Heat flooded her face. So that was it. He knew exactly what position he'd left her in. Had probably orchestrated it. Break her down, leave her desperate, then offer her scraps and expect gratitude. I need time to think. Of course. He stood. Jensen will drive you back to town. You have until tomorrow to decide. After that, I'll assume you found other arrangements. The ride back to Silver Creek passed in a blur of anger and humiliation. By the time she reached the boarding house, her hands were shaking with rage. How dare he? How dare he act as if she were the one at fault? As if her height and her tardiness, caused by an act of God, were personal failings that required penance. She was so caught up in her fury that she almost missed the figure standing by Mrs. Holloway's gate. Lucian Carter leaned against the fence post, apparently studying the sky. He straightened when he saw her, touched his hat brim in that economical way of his. Miss Rowe. Mr. Carter. She was in no mood for conversation, but politeness had been drummed into her bones. Good day. Heard Darby sent for you. News traveled fast in small towns. Yes. Heard he offered you a position. As his housekeeper. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. A chance to prove myself worthy of his original offer. Eventually. Maybe. Carter's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his gray eyes. That's so. Apparently, arriving late due to a blizzard is a character flaw that requires redemption through domestic service. Now he did react, the corner of his mouth tightening. Man's got a high opinion of himself. Yes, well, Maggie suddenly felt exhausted. I suppose beggars can't be choosers. It's better than... She stopped, not wanting to mention Hartwell's proposition. Better than some things. Carter agreed quietly. He studied her for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. I got a proposition of my own, if you're interested. Her spine stiffened. Mr. Carter. Not that kind. His voice was sharp. I got a cabin on my property. Sits empty. Previous foreman lived there, but he moved on last spring. It needs work, cleaning, fixing up. You do that, you can stay there. No rent. Put in a kitchen garden come spring. You can keep what you grow. I got more work than hands to do it. You can help with the household accounts. Maybe some cooking for the hands during busy season. Honest work for honest pay. Maggie stared at him. Why would you offer this? He was quiet for a long moment, looking past her at something only he could see. My wife stood about as tall as you, he said finally. Took grief for it all her life. Called her beanpole, maypole, all manner of things. Made her try to shrink herself down. Hunch over. Apologize for how God made her. His eyes found hers again. I watched her do it for 10 years before the fever took her. Always did regret not telling her often enough to stand up straight. The unexpected kindness made her throat tight. Mr. Carter, I appreciate... Think on it, he interrupted. The cabin's there if you want it. No strings, no proving yourself, no begging for scraps of what was already promised. Just work and a fair wage. He touched his hat again and walked away, leaving Maggie standing at the gate with tears burning her eyes. She'd been in Silver Creek less than a week, and already she'd seen the worst of people, and now, perhaps, something better. That night, she lay in her narrow bed at the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and weighing her options. Owen Darby offered proximity to the life she'd thought she wanted, even if it came wrapped in humiliation. But Lucian Carter offered something else entirely. Dignity. The word sat in her mind like a warm stone. When was the last time anyone had offered her that? When was the last time she hadn't had to make herself smaller, quieter, less than what she was? In the morning, she'd have to choose. But really, hadn't the choice already been made? The moment Owen Darby had looked at her height with disappointment. The moment he'd made her grovel for what should have been freely given. The moment he'd acted like her existence was an inconvenience to be managed. She thought of Lucian Carter saying, "Stand up straight," and something loosened in her chest. Tomorrow. She'd send word to the Double D Ranch. Thanks, but no thanks. She had other arrangements. For the first time since stepping off that train, Maggie Rowe smiled. The morning Maggie left Silver Creek proper. Frost painted every surface white, and her breath came in small clouds. She'd sent word to Owen Darby declining his generous offer of servitude, pawned her wedding dress to pay Mrs. Holloway what she owed, and now sat beside Lucian Carter on his wagon seat with her trunk and carpetbag loaded behind. He drove in silence, which suited her fine. She was tired of talk, tired of explaining herself, tired of being looked at like some curiosity in a traveling show. The road wound west through stands of cottonwood and pine, following a creek that whispered beneath sheets of ice. "That's the property line," Carter said eventually, indicating a wooden gate with LC burned into the crossbeam. "I run cattle on about 2,000 acres. Small operation compared to some, but it's mine free and clear." The cabin appeared around a bend, tucked into a grove of aspens maybe a quarter-mile from the main house. It was small but solid, built of good logs with a stone chimney. The windows were whole. The roof looked sound. It had been empty long enough for leaves to pile against the door, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with work. Carter pulled up and set the brake. "Like I said, it needs cleaning, but the stove works, pump's not frozen, and the roof doesn't leak. Previous man left some furniture, bed frame, table, couple chairs. You're welcome to it." He helped her down, then unloaded her trunk. Maggie stood looking at the little cabin, something tight and anxious in her chest starting to loosen. It wasn't fancy, wasn't what she'd dreamed of when she'd read Owen's letters about his prosperous ranch, but it was shelter that came without strings or shame. "I'll help you get settled," Carter said, producing a key. "Then I'll show you the main house, introduce you to Chen." "Chen?" "My cook. Been with me 8 years. Came up from California after the railroad work dried up. He mostly handles the ranch hands' meals, but he'll be glad for help with the household accounts. Man can make miracles with beans and beef, but numbers give him fits." The cabin door opened on musty darkness. Carter lit a lamp, revealing a single room with a lean-to addition that served as a bedroom. Dust covered everything, and mice had built nests in the corners, but the bones were good. The stove was indeed sound. The pump handle moved freely, and the furniture, while basic, was sturdy. "I'll send one of the boys with firewood," Carter said, "and Chen will have supplies, flour, coffee, such like. We can work out the details of wages and duties once you're settled." "Mr. Carter," Maggie started, then stopped. "How did you thank someone for treating you like a human being? I appreciate this opportunity." He looked uncomfortable with gratitude. "It's work that needs doing. I'm just glad to have someone capable to do it." After he left, Maggie stood in the middle of the dusty cabin and did something she hadn't done since leaving Missouri. She laughed. Not bitter laughter or social laughter, but real, chest-deep laughter at the absurdity of it all. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man who rejected her for being too tall and too late, only to end up as a bookkeeper for a taciturn cattleman who barely spoke 10 words at a time. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By evening, the worst of the dirt was gone, the mouse nests evicted, and a fire crackled in the stove. One of Carter's ranch hands, a boy who couldn't have been more than 16, had brought firewood and a basket from Chen containing coffee, flour, salt pork, potatoes, and a loaf of fresh bread still warm from the oven. "Mister, Chen says to tell you he's glad for the help." The boy reported, staring openly at her height. "Says Mister, Carter can't tell a ledger from a fence post. Oh, and there's a note from the boss." The note was brief. In Carter's precise hand, "Work starts tomorrow, 8 sharp. Chen will show you the books. Welcome to the LC Ranch. L. Carter." That night, Maggie slept better than she had since leaving home. The narrow bed was just long enough for her frame. The quilts were warm, and the absolute silence of the country wrapped around her like a blessing. No misses. Holloway banging on pipes. No drunken cowboys in the street. No wondering how she'd pay for tomorrow's meal. She woke to pale sunrise and her first full view of the property. The cabin faced east, toward a meadow that probably bloomed wild in summer. The main house sat on a small rise, built of log and stone with a wide porch. Barns and outbuildings clustered nearby, and she could see cattle dotting the distant pastures like scattered pepper. Maggie dressed in her plainest dress, she'd need to make some work clothes soon, and walked to the main house. The path was well worn, easy to follow even in the morning shadows. She knocked at the back door and was greeted by a small, neat Chinese man with silver threading through his black hair. "Miss Rowe," he said, his English accented but clear. "I am Chen. Come, I show you the disaster, mister. Carter calls his accounts." The kitchen was large and efficiently organized, with a massive stove and workbenches scrubbed white. Chen led her through to a small office off the main hallway, where papers covered every surface in no discernible order. "Mr. Carter, he is good with cattle, good with land," Chen explained. "But with numbers he might as well be blind. Last foreman helped some, but since he left," he gestured helplessly at the chaos. Maggie picked up an invoice, then another. Cattle sales, supply orders, wage records, all jumbled together. Some were months old, others recent. It would take days just to sort them by date, let alone make sense of the finances. "Does Mr. Carter know how bad this is?" Chen shrugged eloquently. "He knows he owes money, knows money comes in. Beyond that," another shrug. "This is why he needs help." Maggie hung her shawl on a peg and sat down at the desk. "Then I'd better get started. Could you bring me coffee?" "This is going to take a while." She worked through the morning, creating order from chaos. Carter appeared briefly around 10, looked at the neat stacks she'd created, grunted what might have been approval, and disappeared again. Chen brought lunch, beef stew and cornbread, and ate with her in companionable silence. "You are not what I expected," he said eventually. "What did you expect?" "Someone like Owen Darby would want." His expression made clear what he thought of Owen Darby. Small, soft, easy to push around, not someone who stands tall. "Well, I'm certainly not small." "Is good," Chen said firmly. "Mr. Carter, he respects strength. His wife, she was strong too. Not just tall, but strong here." He tapped his chest. "You remind him, I think." By evening, Maggie had sorted 6 months of paperwork and started on the ledgers. The ranch was profitable, but barely, mainly because Carter had been paying bills twice or not at all, losing track of what was owed and what was paid. She made notes, created systems, tried not to think about how comfortable this felt. Carter appeared as she was preparing to leave. "Chen says you're making progress." "You're not bankrupt, if that's what you're wondering. But you've been hemorrhaging money through poor record keeping. I can fix that." "Good." He hesitated, and she realized he wanted to say something else. "You settling in all right, cabin suit you?" "It's perfect, thank you." He nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. "Sundays are free unless there's urgent work. Chen doesn't cook Sundays, so you're on your own for meals. There's a church in town if you're inclined, though I don't hold with it myself." "Noted." Another nod, and he was gone. Maggie gathered her things, said goodbye to Chen, and walked back to her cabin in the gathering dusk. The temperature was dropping fast, promising another cold night, but smoke already rose from her chimney. Someone had started her fire for her. Inside, she found another basket from Chen, this one with enough food for several days, including a small ham, dried beans, and preserves. There was also fabric, practical cotton and wool, and a note, "For work clothes, Chen." She fingered the fabric, throat tight. In less than a day, these strangers had shown her more consideration than Owen Darby had in 6 months of letters. The next days fell into a pattern. Morning walks to the main house, coffee with Chen, hours bringing order to Carter's chaotic finances, lunch in the warm kitchen, more work, then the evening walk home to her cabin. The ranch hands grew used to seeing her, touched their hats politely, stopped staring quite so much at her height. Carter appeared periodically, reviewing her work with those sharp gray eyes, asking occasional questions that showed he understood more than his disorganization suggested. He never stayed long, never made small talk, but she sensed his satisfaction with her work in the way his shoulders relaxed when he reviewed the ledgers. By the end of the first week, she'd caught up the books and established systems to keep them current. Chen was so pleased he made her a cake, presenting it with a flourish that made her laugh. "Is good to hear," he said. "You don't laugh enough." "Haven't had much to laugh about lately." "No, but that changes now. I think—" Saturday evening found her sewing by lamplight, turning Chen's fabric into practical work dresses. She'd always been good with a needle, had made most of her own clothes out of necessity. No one made ready-made dresses for women her height. A knock interrupted her work. She opened the door to find Carter on her small porch, hat in hand. "Evening," he said. "Sorry to disturb. Wanted to let you know you've got wages coming." He handed her an envelope. "First week's pay, plus a bonus for sorting out that mess." The envelope was heavier than she'd expected. "This is too much." "It's what the work was worth." His tone brooked no argument. "Also wanted to mention, there's a dance in town next Saturday, fundraiser for the school. The ranch usually makes a good showing. You're welcome to come, if you're inclined." A dance, where she'd tower over every woman and half the men, where people would stare and whisper behind their hands. "Thank you, but I don't think—" "Think on it," he interrupted. "Might be good for folks to see you're staying, that you're part of the LC now, but suit yourself." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her holding the envelope and wondering at the invitation. Had it been mere courtesy or something else? She returned to her sewing, but her mind wandered. In the week she'd been at the LC, no one had made her feel unwelcome or freakish. Chen treated her like a favorite niece. The ranch hands were respectful, and Carter himself. She thought of him reviewing her work, the way he'd said good, like it cost him nothing to acknowledge her competence, the way he'd had someone light her fire each evening before she walked home. Small considerations that added up to something she was afraid to name. The next morning, Sunday, dawned clear and cold. Maggie woke with no pressing duties, a luxury she hadn't enjoyed in longer than she could remember. She made coffee, fried eggs and the last of Chen's ham, and sat by her window watching the light creep across the meadow. A rider appeared on the horizon, and she recognized Carter's distinctive seat in the saddle. He was checking fences, probably, or looking for strays. Even on Sunday, a cattleman's work never truly stopped. She watched him disappear over a rise, then returned to her breakfast. Later, she walked, not toward town with its churches and gossips, but deeper into Carter's land. She found a stream running clear beneath a skin of ice, followed it through stands of pine that blocked the wind. The silence was profound, broken only by her footsteps and the occasional call of a raven. She came upon Carter by accident, dismounted near a small clearing where markers stood in neat rows. A cemetery. She realized. Ranch families often had their own burial grounds, too far from town to use the public cemetery. He stood before one particular marker, hat off despite the cold. She started to back away, not wanting to intrude, but a twig snapped under her foot. He turned, unsurprised. "Miss Rowe. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "It's all right." He gestured to the marker. "My wife. Today would have been her birthday." Maggie moved closer, reading the inscription, Sarah McLeod Carter, 1852 to 1880. Beloved wife, stand tall. "McLeod," she said. "Scottish?" Her father came over in '49 for the gold, ended up farming instead. Sarah got his height, near 6 feet in her stockings. Used to joke God made her tall so she could look me in the eye. They stood quietly for a moment. Then Carter said, "She would have liked you. Would have liked that you don't apologize for your height. I spent years trying to shrink myself down, make myself fit." Maggie surprised herself with the admission. Came west thinking I'd found someone who didn't care. Turns out he cared more than most. Darby's a fool. The flat certainty in his voice made her look at him. "You don't even know me." "Know enough. Know you worked yourself sick sorting those books without complaint. Know you treat Chen with respect when half the town won't eat Chinese cooking. Know you stand straight even when folks stare." He put his hat back on. "Sarah taught me to notice such things." He mounted his horse with easy grace. "You heading back?" "I'll walk a bit more." He nodded, started to ride away, then reined in. "That dance next Saturday. If you decide to go, I'll be there. Case you need someone tall enough to dance with proper—" Then he was gone, leaving Maggie standing among the graves with her heart doing strange things in her chest. She looked down at Sarah Carter's marker, at those words, "Stand tall," and felt like she'd been given permission for something she couldn't quite name. The week ahead stretched before her, full of work and purpose, and maybe, just maybe, something more, for the first time in her life. Maggie Rowe wasn't thinking about making herself smaller. She was thinking about standing tall. The cabin had become home in ways Maggie hadn't expected. 2 weeks had passed since her arrival at the Elsie Ranch, and already she'd established routines that felt worn smooth as river stones. Morning coffee by the east window, the walk to the main house with frost crunching underfoot, Chen's cheerful commentary on everything from the weather to the ranch hand's table manners, the satisfying scratch of her pen bringing order to Carter's accounts. But it was the evenings that surprised her most, the way smoke already curled from her chimney when she returned, the small gifts that appeared on her porch, a jar of preserves from Chen, fresh eggs from the henhouse, once a bundle of dried lavender with no note but which smelled like Sarah Carter's grave site. This particular evening brought something new. A wooden crate sat by her door. Carter's neat script on a tag. Thought these might be useful. L.C. Inside, she found books, a dozen volumes, maybe more, practical texts on bookkeeping and ranch management, but also poetry, novels, even a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets. At the bottom, wrapped in brown paper, was a ledger bound in good leather. Her initials already stamped on the cover, M.R. She ran her fingers over the gold lettering, throat tight. When had he noticed her middle initial? When had he taken the time to have this made? A knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Chen, bundled against the evening cold. "Mister, Carter says you maybe need help with cook stove." He peered past her at the stove that had been temperamental lately, requiring coaxing to maintain heat. "I know this stove is like a stubborn mule, needs proper handling." He showed her the tricks, how to adjust the damper just so, where to tap when the door stuck, which wood burned best for steady heat. While he worked, he talked. "Mr. Carter, he is different since you come. Less." Chen searched for the word. "Less stone, you know." "I don't think Mr. Carter has changed on my account." Chen gave her a look that suggested she was being deliberately obtuse. "You see him at cemetery. Yes, he goes every week, her birthday. But this first time in 5 years he talks to someone there. He was just being polite." "Mr. Carter is never just polite. He says what he means or says nothing." Chen tested the stove door, satisfied with its operation. "His good thing, this change, he grieves too long alone." After Chen left, Maggie unpacked the books properly. Arranging them on the shelf Carter had apparently anticipated she'd need. She tried not to read meaning into the selection, the mix of practical and personal, the way some volumes looked well-read while others were new. She opened the Shakespeare, found a passage marked with a thin ribbon, Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Her hand stilled. Surely Carter hadn't meant. But no, these were probably his wife's books, the marked passages, Sarah's choices. Still, Maggie found herself reading the sonnet twice before closing the volume. The next morning brought the first real storm of winter. Maggie woke to wind howling around the cabin walls and snow driving horizontal past her windows. The path to the main house had vanished under drifts, and she couldn't see 10 feet through the white. She'd laid in supplies, thanks to Chen's warnings about Wyoming weather. She had food, water, plenty of wood, but isolation pressed against the windows along with the snow, reminding her how alone she was out here if something went wrong. A pounding at her door made her jump. She opened it to find Carter. So covered in snow, he looked like a walking drift. "Power lines are down between here and town," he shouted over the wind. "Could be days before they're fixed. You best come to the main house until it passes." "I'm fine here." "Cabin's solid, but if something happens, we wouldn't know until too late. Chen's got the guest room ready." It wasn't really a request. Maggie recognized the tone from her father, the kind that brooked no argument when safety was concerned. She packed a small bag, let Carter take her arm against the wind, and struggled through drifts that came past her knees. The main house was warm and solid, built to withstand worse storms than this. Chen had indeed prepared a room, Sarah's sewing room, converted to a guest space but still holding touches of its former purpose. A dress form stood in the corner, carefully covered. Fabric samples pressed between glass frames decorated one wall. "Is only warm room besides Mr. Carter's," Chen explained apologetically. "Other rooms closed off in winter. Save wood." "It's perfect, thank you." The storm raged for 2 days. 2 days of unexpected domesticity, the three of them weathering nature's fury in comfortable proximity. Chen cooked elaborate meals, claiming boredom. Carter worked on tack repair in the parlor, leather and oil scenting the air. Maggie kept the books, wrote letters to suppliers, and tried not to notice how natural this felt. Evenings were the strangest. They gathered in the parlor where the biggest fireplace roared, Chen knitting with surprising skill, Carter reading, Maggie working on a new dress. The silence was companionable, broken by Chen's occasional commentary or Carter reading out interesting passages. "Listen to this," Carter said the second evening, reading from a newspaper weeks old. "Civilization advances westward, bringing proper society to the frontier." What do you suppose they mean by proper society? "Ladies' auxiliaries and temperance meetings," Chen suggested with a grin. "Judgment and small minds," Maggie said before she could stop herself. Carter looked at her over the paper. "Bad experience with proper society." "You could say that." She focused on her stitching. "I never quite fit what they considered proper." "Their loss," Carter said simply, returning to his paper. Later, after Chen had retired, Maggie found herself alone with Carter. She should go to bed, maintain appropriate boundaries. Instead, she stayed in her chair, working by lamplight while he read. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. He lowered his book. "Ask." "Why did you really offer me the job? You could have found someone local, someone who didn't come with complications." He was quiet long enough she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "You stood straight, day I met you, fresh off being jilted. Whole town watching. And you stood straight. Reminded me of Sarah. Way she never let them make her feel small. But you don't know anything about me, my past, my family, why I really came west." "Know enough." He marked his place in the book, set it aside. "Know you're educated, from your handwriting. Know your quality, from your manners. Know you've been hurt but not broken, from your eyes. Rest is your business unless you choose to share it." The grandfather clock ticked in the corner. Wind rattled the windows. Maggie set aside her sewing. "My father was a doctor," she heard herself say. "Country practice in Missouri. He believed in educating daughters same as sons. So I learned Latin and mathematics along with needlework. When he died, I thought I'd teach school, but they said I was too tall, too imposing, would frighten the children. She paused, but Carter just waited, patient as stone. I tried shopkeeping, millinery, secretarial work. Always the same. Too tall, too plain, too much. When I saw Owen's advertisement specifically saying height didn't matter. She shrugged. I thought finally someone saw past the surface. He saw dollar signs. Carter said bluntly. Ranch wife who could work like a man but cost less than hiring hands. Common enough calculation out here. And you, what's your calculation? His gray eyes met hers steadily. Good worker for fair wages, nothing more to it. But there was more to it. She could see it in the careful way he didn't look at her too long, the distance he maintained even in close quarters. Whatever he felt, he wouldn't act on it, not with her dependent on him for work and shelter. The honor in that restraint made her chest tight. The storm broke during the night. Maggie woke to silence, then realized what had woken her, the absence of wind. She rose, wrapped a shawl around her nightgown, and crept to the window. The world had been remade in white. Every surface bore a thick coat of snow, sparkling in moonlight so bright it hurt to look at. The sky had cleared to reveal stars like scattered diamonds, and the temperature had plummeted until the air itself seemed crystalline. A movement caught her eye. Carter stood on the porch below, looking out at his transformed land. He'd thrown a coat over his nightshirt, and his breath came in white plumes. As she watched, he stepped down into the snow, walking a few yards out to where he could see the full sweep of his property under its white blanket. She should go back to bed, allow him his private moment. Instead, she found herself pulling on her wrapper and boots, creeping downstairs and out the door. The cold hit like a physical blow, making her gasp. Carter turned at the sound. Couldn't sleep either. His voice carried clearly in the still air. It's beautiful. She moved to stand beside him, wrapping her shawl tighter. Like the whole world's been made new. Sarah used to say that, said snow covered all the mistakes and ugliness, gave everything a fresh start. He glanced at her. You'll freeze out here. Worth it. Her teeth were already chattering, but she didn't want to go in. Something about the moment felt suspended, fragile as the icicles hanging from the eaves. Carter shrugged out of his coat, draped it around her shoulders over her shawl. It smelled of leather and wood smoke and something uniquely him. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man, standing out here in his nightshirt. He almost smiled. Fair point. They stood together, looking out at the transformed landscape. The coat helped, but cold still seeped through her boots, up her legs. She'd have to go in soon or risk frostbite. But not yet, not quite yet. Thank you, she said quietly. For the books, the ledger, for all of it. Just looking after my investment. Good bookkeepers are hard to find. She might have believed him if his voice had held any of its usual gruffness. Instead, it was soft as the falling snow had been. Maggie, her name on his lips. First time he'd used it. When the road's clear, there'll be talk. You staying here during the storm? Town gossips love a scandal. Let them talk. I've been talked about before. This is different. This could damage your reputation, make things difficult. She turned to look at him then, this careful man trying to protect her from consequences he hadn't created. My reputation was damaged the moment Owen Darby left me standing in the street. You gave me work and shelter when no one else would. If people want to make something ugly out of kindness, that's their failing, not ours. He studied her face in the moonlight. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. All right then, but if it becomes too much, if you need to leave, I'm not going anywhere. The words came out fiercer than intended. I've spent my whole life being pushed from place to place, never quite fitting, never quite right. This is the first place I've felt useful. Wanted. I'm not giving that up for gossip. Something shifted in his expression. For a moment, she thought he might say something, might acknowledge what hummed in the air between them like telegraph wires. Instead, he took her arm. "Inside before you freeze. Chen will never forgive me if I let his bookkeeper catch pneumonia." She let him guide her back, but at the door, she stopped. "Lucian!" He stilled, his hand on her elbow. "The books might have been Sarah's, but you marked that sonnet, didn't you?" A long pause. Then, "Good night, Maggie." He waited until she was inside before following, closing the door against the cold. But something had opened between them that wouldn't close so easily. She felt it in the weight of his coat around her shoulders, in the way her name lingered in the air, in the silence that said more than words. Tomorrow, the world would intrude again. The roads would clear, the gossips would talk. Owen Darby would sneer. But tonight, in this snow-wrapped house, none of that mattered. There was only the warmth of the fire, the comfort of belonging, and the knowledge that she wasn't alone. For now, it was enough. The gossip started before the snow had even melted. Maggie first heard it at Finley's general store, where she'd gone to purchase thread and lamp oil. 2 women near the fabric counter lowered their voices when she entered, but not quite enough. 3 days alone in that house with him, and her supposed to be engaged to Owen Darby not a month ago. Always said there was something unnatural about a woman that tall. Now we know what. Maggie kept her spine straight, selected her thread with care, and approached the counter where Mr. Finley waited with an embarrassed expression. "Morning, Miss Rowe. Find everything you need." "Yes, thank you." She placed her purchases on the counter, aware of the women watching. "And please add a pound of coffee to the ranch account." "Of course." He busied himself with the order, then leaned forward slightly. "Pay them no mind. Miss Storm like that. Folks do what they must to stay safe." His kindness almost undid her. She managed to smile, collected her purchases, and left with her head high. But she heard the whispers resume before the door even closed behind her. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than usual. She'd known this would happen, had tried to prepare herself, but knowing and experiencing were different things. In Missouri, she'd been pitied for her height. Here, she was becoming something worse, a scandal. Chen met her at the kitchen door, took one look at her face, and ushered her inside. "Come, tea first, then you tell me." The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of baking bread. Maggie sat at the worn table while Chen prepared tea with efficient movements. "The town gossips found their new favorite topic," she said when he placed a cup before her. "Ah." Chen sat across from her. "Let me guess. Scarlet woman corrupts grieving widower." "Despite everything," Maggie laughed. "Something like that. People with small lives need big stories. Makes them feel important." He studied her over his own cup. "You worry what Mr. Carter thinks." "I worry it will affect his reputation, his business." Chen snorted. "Mr. Carter's reputation built on 20 years of honest dealing. Not even best gossips can tear that down. Besides, he knows about talk. Went to town this morning." Maggie's stomach tightened. "What did he say?" "Nothing to me, but Tom Bradley says Mr. Carter had words with someone at the bank. Clear words." Before Maggie could ask what kind of words, the man himself appeared in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but she caught the tension in his shoulders. "Miss Rowe, got a minute?" She followed him to the office, heart hammering. He closed the door, moved to stand by the window, hands clasped behind his back. "There's talk in town," he said without preamble. "I know. I heard some of it at Finley's." He turned to face her. "It'll get worse before it gets better. These things always do. Want to give you the chance to reconsider. I can write you a reference, help you find work elsewhere. Denver, maybe, or Cheyenne, somewhere with more opportunities." "Are you dismissing me?" "No." The word came sharp and fast. "I'm giving you options. This kind of talk. It can follow a woman, make life difficult in ways men don't face. Maggie studied his face, seeing the genuine concern there. And if I don't want options, if I want to stay, something flickered in his gray eyes. Then you stay, and to hell with what they say. Won't it affect your business, the ranch? Let me worry about that. He moved from the window, stopped a careful distance from her. But there are ways to minimize the damage. The dance is tomorrow night. We could make an appearance, together. Show them there's nothing improper happening here. Together, her voice came out steadier than she felt. As employer and employee, nothing more. But the way he said it suggested otherwise. Unless you'd rather not be seen with me. That's not the issue, and you know it. Then what is... She thought of standing beside him at a dance. Of all those eyes watching, measuring, judging. Then she thought of hiding in her cabin, letting them think they'd driven her to ground. I'll need to hem my good dress. I haven't worn it since she'd thought she was coming here to marry Owen. Since I arrived. Relief crossed his features, quickly hidden. Good. I'll pick you up at 7. He started to leave, paused at the door. Maggie, whatever they say, whatever you hear, remember, you've done nothing wrong. Neither have we. The next evening, Maggie stood before her small mirror, trying to see enough of herself to judge the effect. The dress was her best, blue wool that brought out what little color her eyes possessed. She'd taken it in during the long winter evenings, fitted it properly to her tall frame instead of trying to hide it. Her hair was pinned up carefully, and she'd allowed herself her mother's pearl ear bobs, the ones she hadn't been able to bear pawning. A knock came precisely at 7. She opened the door to find Carter in his Sunday suit, looking uncomfortable but determined. He stared at her for a long moment, then cleared his throat. You look fitting. From another man it might have been an insult. From Carter, whose compliments came as rare as summer snow, it felt like poetry. The dance was held in the Grange Hall, cleared of its usual farm equipment and strung with lanterns. They could hear the fiddle music from the street, see couples through the windows. Carter helped her from the wagon, offered his arm. Ready? No, but she took his arm anyway. The music stuttered when they entered. Conversations paused, heads turned. Maggie felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers ripple outward like disturbed water. But Carter's arm was steady under her hand, and he guided her through the crowd as if they were the only two people there. Carter, Judge Thornberry nodded greeting, his wife beside him. Miss Rowe, glad you could make it despite the weather. It was masterfully done, acknowledging the storm, legitimizing her presence at the ranch, all in one statement. Mrs. Thornberry, a woman known for her strict propriety, actually smiled. That was quite a blow we had. I trust everyone at the LC weathered it well. Yes, ma'am, Maggie replied. Mister, Chen kept us all fed and warm. Chen's a treasure, Mrs. Thornberry agreed. My husband speaks highly of him. And just like that, Maggie found herself in actual conversation with the town's social arbiter. Other couples drifted over, drawn by the judge's acceptance. Not everyone. She could see knots of people whispering, shooting dark looks, but enough. Then Owen Darby walked in. He had a woman on his arm, small, blonde, everything Maggie wasn't. His eyes found Maggie immediately, widened at her transformed appearance, then narrowed as he took in Carter beside her. Here comes trouble, someone murmured. Owen approached with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything. Well, Miss Rowe, unexpected to see you here. Mr. Darby, she nodded coolly. And with Carter, Owen's smile was all teeth. How enterprising of you. Though I suppose when one opportunity fails, a practical woman finds another. The hall had gone quiet around them. Maggie felt Carter tense beside her. But before he could speak, she did. Yes, I've been fortunate, Mr. Carter offered honest work for honest wages. No false promises, no broken agreements. I've found it refreshing. Owen's face darkened. Now see here, Mr. Darby. Judge Thornberry's voice cut through. I believe you haven't met my niece, Miss Patterson. She's visiting from St. Louis. The judge smoothly drew Owen away, but not before the man shot Maggie a look that promised this wasn't over. Conversation slowly resumed around them. Well done, Carter said quietly. I'm not finished yet. Maggie spotted Chen near the refreshment table, speaking with other Chinese workers from various ranches. If you'll excuse me, I should say hello to Chen. She made her way over, aware of the eyes following her. Chen beamed when he saw her. Miss Maggie, you look beautiful, like a queen. Thank you, Chen. She greeted his companions, fell into easy conversation about the weather, the coming spring, anything but the undercurrents in the room. From the corner of her eye, she saw women watching, reassessing. The fiddle struck up a reel. Couples began forming sets for dancing. Maggie stayed where she was. Knowing her height made her an awkward partner for most men, but then Carter appeared at her elbow. May I? She looked at him in surprise. You don't have to. I want to. He offered his hand. Unless you'd rather not. She took his hand, let him lead her onto the floor. They joined a set with the Thornberrys and two other couples. When the music started, when they began the familiar steps, Maggie forgot about the watching eyes. Carter was one of the few men tall enough that she didn't have to slouch. His hand was steady at her waist, his steps sure despite his earlier claims of discomfort with dancing. You lied, she said as they turned. You dance perfectly well. Sarah insisted I learn, said a man who couldn't dance was only half civilized. They separated for the figure, came back together, around them. She sensed the mood shifting. Other couples were watching, but differently now. She saw a few approving nods, even a smile or two. The dance ended. Carter bowed. She curtsied, and they left the floor as naturally as if they'd done it 100 times. But Owen Darby was waiting near the punch bowl, his pretty companion nowhere in sight. Touching display, he said, words slightly slurred. He'd been drinking. The grieving widower and the desperate spinster. Tell me, Carter, does she keep your books as well as she warmed my bed? The hall went silent. Maggie felt the blood drain from her face, then rush back in a hot tide. But before she could speak, before Carter could move, Chen appeared as if from nowhere. Oh, he exclaimed, and his elbow knocked into Owen's arm. Punch cascaded down the man's expensive suit, bright red against cream wool. So sorry, so clumsy, Owen sputtered, cursing. Chen produced a handkerchief, tried to help, only managing to spread the stain further. In the chaos, Judge Thornberry materialized. Mr. Darby, perhaps you should step outside, get some air. His tone suggested it wasn't a request. Owen looked around, found no support in the faces watching him. Even his pretty companion had backed away. He shot one more venomous look at Maggie, then stormed out. So clumsy, Chen repeated, but his eyes were sharp as flint. Must clean up. The tension broke. Music started again, conversations resumed, but Maggie found herself shaking. Outside, Carter said quietly, You need air. He guided her through a side door into the cold night. She leaned against the building wall, drawing deep breaths. I'm sorry, Carter said. I should have known he'd try something. It's not your fault. She pressed her hands to her hot cheeks. God, the things he said were lies. Everyone in that room knows it. Do they? She laughed bitterly. Or are they thinking where there's smoke, there's fire? Carter moved closer, not touching, but near enough she felt his warmth. What they're thinking is that Owen Darby is a mean drunk who can't stand losing. What they saw was you handling yourself with grace while he made a fool of himself. Chen's the one who handled it. Chen's been wanting to do something like that for weeks. Owen's been spreading poison in town, trying to salvage his pride. Tonight killed any credibility he had left. Maggie straightened, pulled her shawl tighter. We should go back in. We don't have to. I can take you home if you'd rather. She thought about it. The easy path, retreat to her cabin, hide until the talk died down. But that's what Owen wanted, what the gossips wanted, to make her small, drive her out. No, we go back in. We dance again. We show them they can't run me off. Something fierce crossed Carter's face. That's my girl. The words hung between them. My girl, not his employee, not the bookkeeper. His girl. I didn't mean, he started. Yes, you did. She met his eyes steadily. And we both know it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, this isn't the time. Not with Owen stirring trouble. Not with your reputation already under fire. You deserve better than stolen moments and fighting gossip. What if I don't want to wait for the perfect time? What if I'm tired of putting life on hold for what others think? He cupped her face in one calloused hand, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Then you're braver than I am. The door burst open, spilling light and music. They stepped apart as Chen appeared. Coast is clear. Owen gone home. Judge's wife asks, will you lead the Virginia reel? Carter looked at Maggie, questioning. She nodded. Tell her we'd be honored. They went back in together, took their place at the head of the line. The fiddles struck up, and Maggie let the music carry her through the figures. Owen was gone, but his words lingered like smoke. By tomorrow, they'd be all over town, twisted and embellished. But tomorrow she'd still have her work, her cabin, her place at the LC. She'd have Chen's fierce protection and Carter's steady presence. She'd have the memory of his hand on her face, calling her brave. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train in Missouri. It was harder, lonelier in some ways, but it was real, built on truth instead of pretty lies. And for tonight, spinning down the line with Carter's hand in hers, it was enough. The storm came 3 weeks after the dance, arriving with little warning on a Tuesday evening. Maggie had spent the day in town, settling accounts with suppliers and weathering the mixture of cold shoulders and curious glances that had become her lot since Owen's outburst. The first fat raindrops caught her halfway back to the ranch, and within minutes, the deluge had turned the road to thick mud. By the time she reached the LC, her horse was laboring and she was soaked through. Tom Bradley met her at the barn, taking the reins with a worried expression. Better get inside. Miss, this looks to be a bad one. Sky's got that green cast to it. She slogged to her cabin, changed into dry clothes, and stoked the fire. The rain hammered on the roof like fists, and the wind began to pick up, moaning through the trees. She tried to settle with a book, but something about the storm felt different, meaner than the usual spring weather. The first crack came around 8 o'clock, a sound like a gunshot that made her jump. Through her window, she saw a massive pine topple, missing the chicken coop by mere feet. Then another crack, closer this time. She was debating whether to risk running to the main house when her door burst open. Carter stood there, water streaming from his coat. We need to get you out, now. What? A tremendous crash cut her off. The roof beam above her bed split with a groan, and suddenly she could see the angry sky through a growing gap. Move! Carter grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door as another section of roof peeled away like paper. They stumbled out into the chaos of wind and rain. She looked back to see her cabin, her safe, small home, coming apart at the seams. Carter half-dragged, half-carried her through the storm. Debris flew past, branches, shingles, a bucket she recognized from the barn. The wind tried to tear them apart, but his grip was iron. When she stumbled, he simply lifted her, carrying her the last yards to the main house. They crashed through the door into sudden stillness. Chen was there with towels and blankets. Exclaiming in rapid Chinese, the house groaned under the wind's assault but held firm. built to withstand worse than this.
The cabin,
Maggie gasped, shivering violently.
my things.
Things can be replaced, Carter said roughly. He was breathing hard, water pooling around his boots. You all right, not hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak past the chattering of her teeth. Chen wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, pressed a cup of something hot into her hands. Whiskey-laced tea, she realized, feeling it burn down her throat. Come, Chen said. Must get warm. Bath ready upstairs.
I can't.
You can and will, Carter interrupted, before you catch your death. Chen, help her. I need to check the stock. He was gone before she could protest. Back out into the storm. Chen tisked and ushered her upstairs to the bathroom, where a steaming tub waited. You get in, he ordered. I bring dry clothes. Alone. Maggie stripped off her sodden garments and sank into the hot water. She could hear the storm still raging, feel the house shudder occasionally. But here in this copper tub she was safe. The magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. Her cabin was destroyed. Everything she owned beyond what she'd been wearing. Gone. A knock came at the door. Miss Maggie, I leave clothes here. Sarah's things, but close enough to fit. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a borrowed robe that was only a little too short, she found Carter and Chen in the kitchen. Carter had changed into dry clothes, his hair still damp. How bad, she asked. Your cabin took the worst of it. Roof's gone. North wall collapsed. I'm sorry. Maggie. She sank into a chair, the loss hitting her like a physical blow. Her books, including the ones he'd given her mother's quilt, the leather ledger with her initials, small things, but all she'd had. Tomorrow we'll salvage what we can. Carter continued. See what survived. Where will I? She stopped, the implications crashing over her. She had no home, no clothes beyond what Chen had found, and moving into the main house permanently, guest room yours as long as needed. Chen said firmly, no arguments. Chen's right, Carter added. We'll figure out permanent arrangements later. Tonight you're safe. That's what matters. A tremendous crash from outside made them all jump. Through the window, they could see another tree down, this one across the road. Going to be a long night, Chen observed. It was. They sat together in the kitchen, listening to the storm's fury. Chen made coffee and sandwiches, keeping busy. Carter paced, checking windows, clearly wanting to do something but forced to wait it out. Maggie sat wrapped in Sarah's robe, trying not to think about what tomorrow would show. I've seen worse, Carter said eventually, more to himself than them. Spring of '78 tornado took the whole barn. Sarah and I huddled in the root cellar, thought the world was ending. Did you rebuild? Better than before. That's what you do out here. Weather knocks you down. You get back up. He looked at her. This doesn't change anything. Maggie, your job, your place here. Want you to know that? But it did change things. She could feel it in the air between them, in the way he carefully didn't look at her too long. Living in the same house, even temporarily, would feed the gossip's fire. Her reputation, already tarnished, would be thoroughly ruined. Maybe I should go back east, she said quietly. This seems like a sign. No. The word came sharp from both men simultaneously. You don't run from weather, Chen added, or from talk. You stay. You rebuild, is the only way. Carter moved to stand by her chair, not touching, but close. I meant what I said at the dance. You're braver than you know. Don't let a storm, any kind of storm, prove me wrong. The wind chose that moment to slam something against the house, rattling the windows. They all flinched. Then Chen laughed. Storm agrees. You stay. Despite everything, Maggie found herself smiling. All right, but only until we can figure out something proper. I won't give the town more ammunition than necessary." "Hang the town," Carter muttered, but he moved away, giving her space again. They kept vigil until the wind finally began to die near dawn, when gray light filtered through the windows. Carter ventured out to assess the damage. He returned, grim-faced. "Bad as I thought. Your cabin's done for, Maggie, but the barn's held. Stock's all right. We were lucky." Lucky. She thought of her few possessions scattered to the winds and had to swallow a bitter laugh.
I'll go see what I can salvage," she said.
"We'll all go," Carter corrected. "After breakfast, no point stumbling around in the mud exhausted." Chen had already started cooking, filling the kitchen with the smell of bacon and biscuits. It felt surreal, sitting at the table like any other morning while her life lay in ruins a quarter-mile away. The sun came out as they walked to the cabin, highlighting the devastation in cruel detail. The storm had peeled the cabin apart like an onion, leaving walls standing but the roof completely gone. Her belongings were scattered across the meadow. She could see fabric caught in trees, papers plastered to the ground, broken furniture tumbled like dice. "Oh," was all she could manage. They picked through the wreckage carefully. Some things had survived. Her mother's cameo brooch, found wrapped in a muddy petticoat. A few of the books, water-damaged but salvageable. The leather ledger, miraculously intact under what had been her overturned desk. "Look," Chen called. He'd found her sewing basket. The contents scattered but mostly accounted for. Small victories, but she clung to them. Carter worked steadily beside her, treating each recovered item with care. When she found the Shakespeare sonnets, pages damp but readable, he actually smiled. Built to last, those words, like some people. By midday, they'd recovered what they could. A pitiful pile. Really, the bones of a life, but not much more. Tom Bradley and the other hands came to help clear the dangerous debris, all of them careful not to meet her eyes too long, not to acknowledge what this meant. "We can rebuild," Tom offered. "Wouldn't take but a few weeks." "No," Carter's voice was firm. "Not worth it for a cabin that'll sit empty. We'll use the lumber for repairs elsewhere." Tom glanced between them, understanding dawning. "Sure, boss. Whatever you say." As the men worked, Maggie walked to the edge of the meadow where wildflowers would bloom come summer. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. Everything looked different in the aftermath, scoured clean, but somehow smaller. Carter found her there. "You all right?"
"I don't know."
She turned to face him.
"Last night, when you came for me, you could have been killed. That tree missed you by inches. Couldn't leave you there."
"Why?" The word came out raw. "Why do you care what happens to me?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "You know why." "Do I, because you've been careful not to say, careful to keep distance, keep things proper." She gestured at the ruined cabin. "Well, proper's gone now, so maybe it's time for truth." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw everything he'd been hiding. "Truth is, I've been falling for you since the day you stood in that snow, too proud to beg for help. Truth is, I lie awake thinking about you in that cabin, so close but might as well be miles away. Truth is, when I saw that roof coming apart, I thought—" He stopped, jaw tight. "What?" she whispered.
"I thought I'd lost someone else. Couldn't bear it. Not again."
The words hung between them in the bright morning air. Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. For the cabin, for the storm, for this careful man admitting to fear. "You didn't lose me," she said softly. "I'm right here." "For how long living in my house? Unmarried? The talk will be vicious. Might drive you off yet. Then maybe we should give them something else to talk about." He went very still. "What are you saying?" Was she really doing this standing in the wreckage of her home, hair still damp from last night's rain, suggesting— what? But she thought of the way he'd carried her through the storm, the careful distance he maintained for her honor. the Shakespeare he'd marked for her to find. I'm saying I'm tired of being careful. Tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. Tired of letting other people's opinions matter more than truth.
Maggie,
Am I wrong, do you not? He kissed her, right there in the muddy meadow with the ranch hands probably watching. He cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her like a drowning man finding air. She clutched his shoulders, feeling the world tilt and resettle on a new axis. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything. He said, everything's already complicated. The talk will happen regardless. At least this way it's true. He pulled back to study her face. You sure? Because if we do this, I won't be casual about it. Won't hide it or pretend it's less than it is. What is it? Everything, he said simply. You're everything. The words undid her. She pressed her face into his shoulder, let him hold her while her careful control finally cracked. She cried for her lost cabin, her scattered belongings, the long, lonely years before this. But mostly she cried from relief, from the bone-deep recognition of finding home not in a place, but in a person. Am I late? She whispered into his shirt, remembering that night in the snow, the way he'd said she was right on time. His arms tightened around her. No, love, you're right on time. Behind them, she heard whooping from the ranch hands, Chen's delighted cackle. Let them look. Let the whole town look. She'd lost her cabin but found something worth more than walls and a roof. She'd found the place where she fit, and she was never letting go. News of Maggie living in Carter's house spread through Silver Creek like wildfire in dry grass. By the third day after the storm, she couldn't go to town without feeling the weight of every stare, hearing the whispers that followed her like shadows. Bold as brass, that one. Poor Sarah must be turning in her grave. Always said there was something unnatural about a woman that tall. Maggie kept her chin high, conducted her business with quiet dignity, and returned to the ranch where Carter waited with worried eyes and Chen fussed over her like a mother hen. They'd established a careful routine. She slept in the guest room, took meals with the men, maintained every propriety possible. But it didn't matter. The town had made up its mind. The confrontation came on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after the storm. Maggie had gone to town for supplies, leaving Carter working with the spring calves. She was loading her purchases into the wagon when Owen Darby appeared, flanked by Clarence Hartwell and another man she didn't recognize. Miss Rowe. Owen's voice carried across the street, deliberately loud. Or should I say, Mrs. Carter hard to keep track when there's been no wedding. She continued loading the wagon, refusing to acknowledge him, but he moved closer, his companions spreading out to block her path. Nothing to say, that's new. You had plenty to say at the dance, as I recall. Please move aside. Mr. Darby, I have work to do. Work? He laughed, ugly sound that drew attention from passers-by. Is that what you call it, living in sin with a man old enough to know better? Heat flooded her face, but she kept her voice level. Mr. Carter has shown me nothing but kindness and respect, which is more than I can say for others. Respect. Owen stepped closer, close enough she could smell the whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. A respectable woman doesn't live with a man unwed. A respectable woman doesn't parade around town like she owns it when everyone knows what she is. And what am I, Mr. Darby? A conniving opportunist who saw a lonely widower and took advantage. First me, then Carter. Who's next when he tires of you? The slap echoed off the storefront walls. Owen staggered back, hand to his reddening cheek, eyes wide with shock. Maggie's palm stung, but she felt oddly calm, as if she'd stepped outside herself to watch some other woman finally fight back. How dare you? Owen sputtered. You'll pay for that. You... Problem here? The voice came from behind her. Not Carter. She'd have recognized his tone immediately. She turned to find Judge Thornberry standing with Marshal Henderson, both men taking in the scene with sharp eyes. This woman assaulted me. Owen began. I want her arrested. That's so. The marshal looked at Maggie. You strike this man. Miss. Yes. No point denying what half the street had seen. Why? He insulted my honor and that of Mr. Carter. He blocked my path and refused to move when asked. He's been drinking and acting in a threatening manner. She kept her voice steady, factual. I defended myself. Defended yourself? Owen's voice rose. From words you can't hit a man for speaking truth. Truth. Judge Thornberry's voice was thoughtful. Interesting concept. Mr. Darby, tell me, what truth were you speaking? Owen's face flushed darker. Everyone knows she's living in sin with Carter, playing house without benefit of marriage. It's disgusting. I see. The judge studied him. And you felt it necessary to confront Miss Rowe about this moral failing. In the middle of Main Street with 2 companions to ensure she couldn't leave while intoxicated. I'm not drunk. Marshal Henderson snorted. Son, I can smell you from here. Now, seems to me Miss Rowe was going about her lawful business when you and your friends decided to harass her. That about right. She's living with a man unmarried. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. Unwise, perhaps, given gossips like you, but not illegal. The marshal turned to Maggie. You want to press charges for harassment. Miss... She met Owen's eyes, saw the rage there mixed with something else. Fear, maybe, of losing face, of being the one judged. No, I just want to go home. Smart choice. Judge Thornberry stepped aside, clearing her path. Mr. Darby, Mr. Hartwell, I suggest you gentlemen find other entertainment. And Owen, next time you feel the need to defend public morality, try doing it sober. Owen looked like he wanted to say more, but Hartwell grabbed his arm, murmuring urgently. They retreated, Owen shooting poisonous looks over his shoulder. Thank you, Maggie said quietly. The judge studied her with thoughtful eyes. My wife thinks highly of you. Miss Rowe says you're a woman of good character in difficult circumstances. I'm inclined to agree. He paused. But Owen's not entirely wrong about one thing. This situation, it's untenable. For your sake more than proprieties. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Maggie standing by her loaded wagon with shaking hands and burning cheeks. The marshal lingered a moment longer. Word of advice. Miss Owen Darby's a snake when sober and worse when drunk. Watch yourself. Then he too was gone, and Maggie was left to climb into her wagon under the weight of dozens of watching eyes. She made it halfway back to the ranch before she had to pull over, hands trembling too badly to hold the reins. She'd hit him, actually slapped Owen Darby in the middle of Main Street. Part of her was horrified at her loss of control, but another part, a part that had been pushed down and made small for too many years, felt fiercely glad. By the time she reached the ranch, she'd composed herself, but Carter took one look at her face and knew something had happened. What is it? What's wrong? I slapped Owen Darby. Carter went very still. You what? She told him everything. Owen's words, the confrontation, the marshal and judge's intervention. As she spoke, Carter's face darkened like a gathering storm. I'll kill him, he said quietly when she finished. This time, I'll actually kill him. No. She caught his arm as he turned toward the door. That's what he wants. An excuse to play victim, to escalate things. We can't give him that. He cornered you, insulted you, made you feel unsafe in town. Carter's voice was rough with suppressed rage. A man protects what's his. I'm not yours to protect, she said, then softened it. Not like that. I protected myself. By hitting him. By standing up straight. By refusing to shrink. By showing him and everyone watching that I won't be made small anymore. She touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw.
Don't you see violence from you proves his point? That I'm some fallen woman who's corrupted you? But me defending myself, that's different. He covered her hand with his, some of the rage draining away. Judge is right, though this situation can't continue. You living here unmarried, it's fuel for men like Darby. I know. They stood there in the kitchen, hands linked, both understanding what needed to happen but neither willing to voice it first. Finally, Chen cleared his throat from the doorway. If I may, perhaps it's time for practical solutions. Chen, Carter warned. No, let him speak. Maggie turned to the cook. What practical solution did you have in mind? Chen smiled. Simple. You marry, soon, before Owen makes more trouble. It's not that simple, Carter said. Maggie deserves better than a rushed wedding because of gossip. She deserves courting. Time to be sure. I'm sure. Both men looked at her. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, but continued. I've been sure since the night of the storm. Since before that, really, the question is whether you're sure. Carter stared at her. Maggie, I've been sure since the day I marked that sonnet, but marriage because the town forces it. Not because the town forces it. Because we want it. The timing might be Owen's doing, but the choice is ours. She squeezed his hand. Unless you need more time to be certain. The only thing I'm certain of is that I want you as my wife. Have since you walked into that disaster of an office and started setting things right. He pulled her close. But I wanted to do this properly. Court you like you deserve. You gave me shelter when I had none. Work when others saw only my height. Books when I'd lost everything. You've been courting me all along. Lucian, you just didn't call it that. Chen coughed delicately. So, wedding. Wedding, Carter agreed, not looking away from Maggie's face. If you'll have me. Yes. Simple word, but it felt like stepping off a cliff into open air. Yes, I'll have you. Chen clapped his hands. Good, I make feast. Invite everyone. Show whole town what real celebration looks like. Chen, Carter started. No arguments. You get married properly, with witnesses and food and music. Show Owen Darby what he lost. Show everyone Miss Maggie chooses you, not settles for you. His dark eyes gleamed. Besides, I already planned menu. Despite everything? Maggie laughed. Of course you have. Next Saturday. Carter decided. Give us a week to arrange things. Unless that's too soon. Not soon enough, Maggie said, thinking of Owen's ugly words, the way they'd tried to diminish what she and Carter had. But it'll do. Word of the engagement spread as fast as news of the slap. By evening, they had their first visitors, Judge and Mrs. Thornberry, come to offer congratulations and support. About time, Mrs. Thornberry said briskly. Anyone with eyes could see you two belong together. Now, about the wedding. You'll need a dress, flowers, proper invitations. We thought something simple. Maggie began. Nonsense. You'll have a real wedding. One this town won't forget. I'll help organize. Consider it my wedding gift. She smiled at Maggie's startled look. My dear, you've been treated abominably by some in this town. Time to show them they're wrong. After they left, Maggie found herself overwhelmed. In one day, she'd gone from town pariah to engaged woman with the judge's wife planning her wedding. Second thoughts? Carter asked, finding her sitting on the porch in the evening light. No, just, it's a lot. This morning I was nobody, living in sin according to the gossips. Now I'm marrying you and Mrs. Thornberry wants to make it a town event. He sat beside her, close enough their shoulders touched. We don't have to do it their way. Could ride to the justice of the peace tomorrow. Be done with it. Is that what you want? I want you to be happy, however that happens. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. I want the wedding. Want to stand up in front of everyone and choose you, publicly, proudly. Want Owen Darby to see what he threw away. Want the gossips to choke on their words. Bloodthirsty woman, he said, but she heard the smile in it. Your bloodthirsty woman. Mine, he agreed, and kissed her there on the porch where anyone could see. Let them look, Maggie thought, kissing him back. Let them all look and see that she'd found where she belonged. Not because she settled, not because circumstances forced it, but because she chose it. She chose him, and he chose her, and that was worth more than all the gossip in Wyoming. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations. Mrs. Thornberry descended on the ranch like a benevolent hurricane, bringing fabric samples, flower suggestions, and a seamstress who took one look at Maggie's height and declared it a welcome challenge. Finally, a bride I won't have to hem up, Mrs. Morrison exclaimed, measuring tape flying. Do you know how refreshing it is to let a dress fall to its proper length? Maggie stood on a makeshift platform in the parlor, trying not to fidget as pins went in around her. The dress was simpler than what she'd packed for Owen, cream-colored rather than pure white, with clean lines that emphasized rather than disguised her height. Beautiful, Chen pronounced from the doorway. Like queen. Like a scarecrow, Maggie corrected, catching sight of herself in the mirror. All angles and height. Like a woman who stands tall, Carter said from behind Chen. He'd been banned from the fitting, but apparently couldn't resist looking. His gray eyes traveled over her slowly, warmly. Mrs. Morrison, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Out, Mrs. Thornberry shooed him away. Bad luck to see the dress before the wedding. Worth it, he called back, and Maggie felt heat rise in her cheeks. The news of Owen's public confrontation and Maggie's response had shifted something in the town's perception. While some still whispered, others began to speak up in her defense. She heard about it from Chen, who gathered gossip like a magpie collected shiny things. Mrs. Baker at the Mercantile says Owen had it coming. Says any man who corners a woman deserves what he gets. The minister's wife thinks you showed remarkable restraint. Says she'd have done more than slap him. Tom Bradley heard Owen's been drinking heavy since his new girl left him. Says she doesn't want a man who chases after another man's woman. That last made Maggie pause. I was never Owen's woman. No, Chen agreed. But he thought he owned you because he sent letters. Some men think wanting is same as having. The truth of that sat heavy. Owen had never seen her as a person, just a solution to his need for free labor disguised as marriage, when she'd failed to arrive on schedule. He'd discarded her like a broken tool. His rage now came not from lost love, but from wounded pride. The tall woman he'd rejected had found better, and publicly. 3 days before the wedding, another visitor arrived. Maggie was in the office, working on the monthly accounts, when Tom Bradley knocked. Lady here to see you, Miss Maggie, says it's important. The lady turned out to be Emma Carstairs, Owen's former fiancée, the small blonde he'd paraded at the dance. She stood in the parlor looking uncomfortable but determined. Miss Rowe, thank you for seeing me. Maggie gestured to a chair, curious despite herself. How can I help you, Miss Carstairs? I wanted to apologize and to warn you. Emma twisted her gloves in her lap. Owen's been saying things, ugly things, about you and Mr. Carter. That's nothing new. No, but now he's saying he'll stop the wedding, that he has proof of impropriety, that he'll stand up during the ceremony and tell everyone what you really are. Cold settled in Maggie's stomach. What proof could he possibly have? He says he has a letter from you proposing arrangements before you ever met Mr. Carter. Emma met her eyes. But I know he's lying. I've seen him practice your handwriting. He's planning something awful. Maggie sat very still, mind racing. A forged letter, presented at the right moment, could damage her reputation beyond repair. Even if proven false later, the doubt would linger. Why are you telling me this? Emma's pretty face hardened. Because I know what it's like to be Owen's target. When I broke our engagement after the dance, he spread rumors about me too. Said I was loose, that I'd entertained other men. My own parents barely speak to me now. She stood. I couldn't let him do worse to you. Not when you've done nothing but refuse to be his victim. After Emma left, Maggie found Carter and told him everything. His face went dark as storm clouds. I'll handle Darby. No. She caught his arm. Violence won't solve this. We need to be smarter. Then what do you suggest? An idea formed. Risky, but possible. We invite him to the wedding. Carter stared at her. You've lost your mind. Hear me out. He's planning to make a scene whether he's invited or not. But if he's a guest, if we welcome him publicly, it takes away his power. He can't claim we're hiding something if we invite him to witness everything. Maggie. And we make sure Judge Thornberry knows about the forged letter. Have him prepared. If Owen tries anything, he'll be exposed as a forger in front of the whole town. Carter studied her face. You're gambling with our wedding day. I'm gambling that Owen's cowardice is stronger than his spite, that faced with real consequences. He'll back down. She touched his face. Trust me. He caught her hand, pressed it to his cheek. With my life, but Maggie, if he ruins this day for you. He won't. He can't. Because the only thing that matters is that I'm marrying you. The rest is just noise. The invitation was delivered that afternoon. Tom Bradley reported that Owen had stared at it like it might bite him, then crumpled it up and thrown it in the fire. But he'd also stopped drinking and shut himself in his ranch house, which Maggie took as a good sign. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, one of those crystalline spring mornings that made the mountains look close enough to touch. Maggie woke in the guest room for the last time, sunlight streaming through lace curtains, Mrs. Thornberry had insisted on hanging. Chen appeared with breakfast and coffee, fussing over her like a mother. Big day. Must eat. Needs strength for dealing with fools. You think he'll come? Owen, maybe. But doesn't matter. You have bigger men on your side now. He smiled. Mr. Carter up since dawn, pacing like expectant father. Never seen him nervous before. That made her smile. The idea of steady, calm Lucian Carter nervous about anything seemed impossible. But then, she was nervous too, hands trembling as she dressed in her chemise and corset. Mrs. Thornberry arrived with reinforcements. Her daughters, Mrs. Morrison. Even Judge Thornberry's quiet niece from St. Louis. They transformed the bedroom into a dressing area, chattering and laughing as they helped Maggie prepare. The dress was perfect, Mrs. Morrison had worked magic, creating something that made Maggie look elegant rather than awkward. Her height became regal, her angles graceful. Her mother's pearl earbobs provided the final touch. Beautiful, Mrs. Thornberry pronounced. Now, flowers. The bouquet was simple, wildflowers from the meadow where her cabin had stood, mixed with roses from Mrs. Thornberry's garden. The combination should have looked odd but somehow worked, wild and cultivated together. A knock interrupted the preparations. Mrs. Thornberry opened the door to reveal Judge Thornberry. Ladies, if I might have a word with the bride. The women filed out, leaving Maggie alone with the judge. His expression was serious. Owen Darby is here, he said without preamble. Arrived early, took a seat in the back. He's subdued. But I wanted you to know. Her stomach tightened. Is he planning something? Marshal Henderson is watching him. So am I. If he makes any disturbance, he'll be removed. The judge studied her. You can still change your mind. Have him escorted out now. No, let him stay. Let him see what he threw away. Judge Thornberry smiled slightly. You're a formidable woman, Miss Rowe. Carter's a lucky man. He offered his arm. Now, I believe you need someone to walk you down the aisle. She'd planned to walk alone, having no male relatives. But the judge's offer touched her deeply. I'd be honored. The ceremony was held in the main parlor, opened up and filled with flowers. It seemed half the county had come, packed into the house and spilling onto the porches. Maggie caught glimpses as she waited. Chen in his best clothes, beaming like a proud uncle. The ranch hands scrubbed and uncomfortable in their Sunday suits. Mrs. Thornberry dabbing at her eyes. And in the back, Owen Darby, sitting alone, face unreadable. Then the music started. Mrs. Baker's daughter on the piano, and Judge Thornberry let her in. Carter stood by the fireplace with the minister, and when he saw her, his face transformed. The worries she'd glimpsed all week vanished, replaced by something that made her eyes burn. Love. Yes, but more. Pride, joy, a fierce possession that said mine, clearer than words. She walked toward him, head high, aware of the watching crowd, but focused only on his gray eyes. When Judge Thornberry placed her hand in Carter's, she felt something settle deep in her chest. Home. She was home. The minister began the ceremony. Maggie heard the words but couldn't focus on them, too aware of Carter's hand holding hers, the way he looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. If anyone here has cause why these two should not be joined. The pause stretched. Maggie felt the room hold its breath. In the back, a chair creaked. She didn't turn, but in her peripheral vision, she saw Marshall Henderson shift slightly. Silence. Owen had backed down. The minister continued, relief coloring his voice. They exchanged vows. Carter's voice rough with emotion as he promised to cherish and honor her. Maggie's own voice stayed steady until the end, when it broke on, "As long as we both shall live. I now pronounce you man and wife." Carter didn't wait for permission. He cupped her face and kissed her thoroughly, properly, in front of everyone. The room erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, Maggie was breathless and laughing. "Hello, wife," Carter murmured. "Hello, husband." They turned to face their guests as man and wife. Maggie's eyes found Owen in the back. He sat frozen, face pale, looking like a man who just realized the depth of his loss. As she watched, he stood abruptly and left, pushing past well-wishers to escape. "He's gone," Carter said quietly. "Good." She turned away from the door, from the past, from what might have been. "I've got everything I need right here." The celebration lasted hours. Chen had outdone himself with the food. The ranch hands had decorated the barn for dancing, and it seemed everyone wanted to wish them well. Even some who'd gossiped before came forward with genuine smiles and congratulations. "You did good," Mrs. Thornberry whispered during a quiet moment, showed them all what real courage looks like. As evening fell and guests began departing, Maggie found herself on the porch with her new husband, watching the sun set over the mountains. She still wore her wedding dress, though her careful hair had come partly undone from dancing. "No regrets?" Carter asked. "Not one." She leaned into him. "Though I am curious what Owen planned with that forged letter. Judge Thornberry confiscated it when Owen left. Apparently, it was poorly done. Your supposed handwriting looked nothing like the real thing." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Emma Carstairs was right about his plans, though he intended to humiliate you. Instead, he humiliated himself. By realizing what he lost good, man needed a lesson in consequences." They stood quietly, watching the sky turn purple and gold. Inside, Chen could be heard directing the cleanup, ranch hands joking as they worked, normal sounds of the life she'd chosen. Ready to go home, Mrs. Carter. Home, not a cabin that could be destroyed by storms, not a place dependent on others' charity. Home was this man beside her, this ranch they'd built together, this life they'd chosen despite gossip and spite and all who said it couldn't work. "I've been home since the day you offered me shelter," she said. "Just took a while to realize it." He turned her to face him, and she saw her future in his eyes. Quiet mornings and shared work. Chen's cooking and ranch hands' laughter. Children who'd grow tall and proud. Years of standing together against whatever storms came. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For being brave enough to stay. For standing tall when it would have been easier to run. For choosing me when you could have had easier options." "Easier isn't better," she said, remembering Owen's promise of prosperity. Hartwell's oily opportunities. All the ways she could have made herself smaller to fit what others wanted. "And you chose me too. Remember when I was nothing but a too-tall spinster with no prospects? You were never that, not to me." He kissed her again, soft and sure. "You were always exactly what I needed. Just took me a while to admit it." "Right on time," she murmured against his lips, and felt him smile. "Right on time," he agreed. Inside, Chen called that coffee was ready. Their guests were gone, leaving just family. The unconventional, chosen family of the LC Ranch. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges, gossip that would take time to fade. Owen's wounded pride to watch for. But tonight, Maggie stood tall beside her husband, wearing her mother's pearls and a dress that fit perfectly, surrounded by people who saw her worth exactly as she was. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to find where she belonged, and it had been worth every moment of doubt and struggle, because sometimes the longest roads led to the best destinations, and sometimes being too tall was exactly the right height. "Coming?" Carter asked, holding out his hand. She took it, lacing their fingers together. Always. They went inside together, stepping from the last light of their wedding day into the warm glow of their future. And Maggie knew with bone-deep certainty that she was finally, truly home. 3 months into their marriage, Maggie had settled into a rhythm of contentment she'd never imagined possible. Mornings began with coffee shared in the kitchen while Chen hummed over the stove. Days were filled with ledgers and accounts, but also with learning the deeper workings of the ranch. Which cattle were promising, which pastures needed rest, how to read weather in the movement of clouds over the mountains. But it was the evenings she treasured most, sitting with Lucian on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, talking about everything and nothing. He'd taken to reading aloud while she mended or worked on a quilt she was making from scraps of her old life and knew. "Listen to this," he said one evening, reading from a letter. "Frank Morrison from the Circle J wants to know if we'd sell him that bull calf from Bessie's line. The one with the white blaze, Chen's already named him. You know, we can't sell anything Chen's named." Lucian's mouth quirked. "Chen names everything. By that logic, we'd never sell anything." "Exactly his plan," she smiled, needle flashing in the lamplight. "Besides, that calf has good bones, worth keeping for breeding." He set the letter aside, watching her work. "You've learned a lot about cattle these past months." "Good teacher." She met his eyes over her quilting, patient with slow learners. "Nothing slow about you." His voice dropped to that tone that still made her stomach flutter. "Smartest woman I know." They were interrupted by hoofbeats on the road. Not unusual. Ranch hands came and went at all hours. But something about the pace made Lucian stand, hand moving instinctively to where his rifle sat by the door. The rider came into view, and Maggie's contentment crumbled. Owen Darby, disheveled and swaying slightly in the saddle. "Carter," he called out. "Need to talk to you." "You're drunk. Darby, go home." "Not drunk. Not very drunk." Owen dismounted clumsily, catching himself on the stirrup. "Got something to say." Lucian moved to block the porch steps, putting himself between Owen and Maggie. "Say it and leave." Owen's bloodshot eyes found Maggie. "Should have been mine. You know that sent for you. Paid for your ticket." "I paid for my own ticket," Maggie said quietly. "With money earned from honest work. Something you wouldn't understand." "Don't interrupt." Owen wheeled on her, finger pointing. Always talking back, That's your problem. Woman should be quiet, sweet, small. His voice turned maudlin. You were supposed to be small. That why you're here? Lucian's voice was dangerous. To complain my wife isn't small enough for your taste. She's not your wife. The words exploded out of Owen. She's mine. I wrote her first. I had plans. Plans that didn't include me. Maggie stood, moving to stand beside Lucian. You wanted a servant you could marry. When I arrived late, you threw me away without a second thought. Because you failed the test, a good woman would have found a way. Would have sent word. Would have... He trailed off, seeming to lose his thought. Would have been smaller. Go home, Owen, Lucian said, before you say something you can't take back. Already did that. At the wedding. Could have stopped it. Had the letter and everything. Owen laughed bitterly. But I sat there like a coward. Watched you take what was mine. I was never yours. You would have been if you'd been on time. If you'd been proper sized. If he hadn't interfered. Owen's face twisted. Coming to town all noble. Offering charity. Making me look bad. You made yourself look bad, Maggie said. Lucian just treated me with basic human decency. The contrast was your doing. Owen took a stumbling step forward. Lucian shifted, ready, but Owen just stood there, swaying. I've lost everything, he said, voice breaking. Ranch is failing. No woman will have me. Town laughs behind my back, all because of you. No, Maggie said firmly. All because of you. Your choices, your cruelty, your pride. You could have been kind when I arrived. Could have honored your word despite the delay. Could have wished us well at the wedding. Every step. You chose spite. She's right, a new voice said. Chen appeared from around the corner, carrying a lamp. Behind him, Tom Bradley and two other ranch hands emerged from the shadows. You make your own misery, Mr. Darby. Owen looked around, realizing he was outnumbered. Some of the belligerents drained away. Just wanted what was mine, he muttered. People aren't possessions. Lucian said, Maggie chose me. I chose her. Nothing to do with you. Owen stood there for a long moment, looking lost and pathetic in the lamplight. Then he turned and stumbled back to his horse. It took him 3 tries to mount. This isn't over, he called, but the threat lacked conviction. You'll see. Both of you'll see. He rode off, weaving in the saddle. They watched until he disappeared into the darkness. Think he'll cause more trouble? Tom asked. Maybe, Lucian said. But he's a broken man. Broken men either find redemption or destruction. Either way. Not our problem unless he makes it one. I'll have the boys keep an eye out. Tom offered. Make sure he doesn't come around bothering Mrs. Carter. The casual way he said Mrs. Carter warmed Maggie's heart. 3 months, and she still felt a thrill at the title. After the hands dispersed, Maggie and Lucian returned to the porch, but the evening's peace was shattered. I should feel sorry for him, Maggie said, but I don't. Why should you man made his bed with thorns? Not your fault he has to lie in it. He really believed I belonged to him just because he wrote letters, like I was a package he'd ordered that arrived damaged. Lucian pulled her close. His loss, my gain. Such a romantic. Chen's cooking makes me soft. He kissed her temple. Come inside. It's getting cold. But as they turned to go in, movement caught Maggie's eye. A rider approaching, but not Owen returning. This rider sat straight, moved with purpose. Who'd visit this late, she wondered. The rider came into the light, and Maggie gasped. A woman, tall in the saddle, wearing a traveling suit covered in trail dust. Hello, the woman called. I'm looking for Margaret Rowe. I was told she works here. I'm Margaret Carter now, Maggie said slowly. And you are... The woman dismounted, pulled off her hat to reveal auburn hair and a face that could have been Maggie's own, 20 years hence. Eleanor Rowe, the woman said, your father's sister, and I've come a very long way to find you. Maggie stared at the aunt she'd never met, her father's estranged sister who'd left Missouri before Maggie was born. The family scandal, whispered about but never explained. Aunt Eleanor. Hello, niece. Eleanor's smile was wry. I hear you've been causing quite a stir, marrying above your station, slapping unsuitable men, refusing to shrink yourself down to size. How wonderfully familiar. I don't understand. How did you find me? Why now? Eleanor glanced at Lucian, then back to Maggie. Perhaps we could discuss this inside. I've been riding for 3 days, and I could use a seat that doesn't move. Of course. Lucian stepped forward. I'm Lucian Carter, Maggie's husband. You're welcome in our home. Husband. Eleanor studied him with sharp eyes remarkably like Maggie's. Good. She'll need a strong partner for what's coming. What's coming? Maggie asked. But Eleanor was already moving past them into the house. Chen, who'd apparently been listening, had coffee and food ready. Eleanor fell on both gratefully, eating with the appetite of someone who'd been living on trail rations. Now, she said finally, pushing back her plate. I suppose you want to know why your mysterious aunt has appeared after 30 years of silence. The thought had crossed my mind. Eleanor smiled, and Maggie saw her own expressions reflected in this stranger's face. Your father and I had a falling out when I was young. I wanted to study medicine, follow in his footsteps. He said it was unsuitable for a woman. I said tradition be damned. You became a doctor. Eventually, after years of fighting for the right, I practice in San Francisco now, mostly treating women who have nowhere else to go. She studied Maggie. When I heard my brother had died, I wanted to reach out, but you'd already left for Wyoming. You've been tracking me. I have friends in various places. The telegraph operator in Silver Creek is one of them. Eleanor's expression grew serious. He's been sending me reports about Owen Darby, about the gossip, about how you've handled yourself. Spying on me. Watching over you. There's a difference. Eleanor leaned forward. Margaret, Maggie, I failed your father. Let pride keep us apart until it was too late. But I won't fail his daughter. I don't need rescue, Maggie said stiffly. I have a good life here. I can see that. A husband who looks at you like you hung the moon. Work that uses your mind. People who respect you. You've built something good. Eleanor paused. Which is why I need to warn you. Owen Darby's been making inquiries. What kind of inquiries? Lucian asked. About your finances. About mineral rights on your land. About legal ways to challenge property ownership. Eleanor's face was grim. He's been corresponding with lawyers in Cheyenne. Expensive ones. Maggie felt cold settle in her stomach. He wants the ranch. He wants to hurt you both. Taking the ranch would just be a bonus. Eleanor pulled out a telegram. This came yesterday from my friend in Cheyenne. Darby's claiming prior agreement on some land parcels. Says he has documentation. Lucian took the telegram, read it with darkening expression. The North Pastures. He's claiming I promised to sell him the North Pastures. Did you? 5 years ago, we discussed it. Never signed anything. Deal fell through when he couldn't meet my price. Lucian crumpled the telegram. But if he's forged one letter already... He wouldn't dare, Maggie said. Not after the wedding. Desperate men dare anything, Eleanor said. And from what I hear, Owen Darby's about as desperate as they come. Ranch failing, reputation ruined, no prospects, dangerous combination. They sat in silence, digesting this. Then Chen, who'd been quietly cleaning up, spoke. So we fight, not with fists, with paper, with law, with truth. Chen's right, Lucian said. We'll need our own lawyers. Judge Thornberry will know who to hire. I can help with costs, Eleanor offered. Consider it years of missed birthday gifts. We don't need charity. Maggie started, but Eleanor cut her off. Not charity, family. That's what family does. Stands together when trouble comes. She smiled sadly. Something your father and I forgot, to both our regrets. You're staying then? Maggie asked. To help. If you'll have me. Been too long since I had family to fight for. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. Besides, I want to meet this Owen Darby. Man who thinks women should be small and quiet, should be educational. Despite everything, Maggie laughed. Aunt Eleanor, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Later, after Eleanor was settled in the guest room and Chen had retired, Maggie and Lucian lay in their bed, moonlight streaming through the windows. Worried, he asked. Some, he pulled her closer. But not overmuch. We've weathered storms before. Not legal ones, not with forged documents and expensive lawyers. No, but we've got truth on our side, and Judge Thornberry, and now, apparently, a formidable aunt. Maggie smiled against his shoulder. She is formidable, isn't she? No wonder Father never spoke of her. She must have terrified him. Tall women who speak their minds often terrify small men. You're not terrified of me. Terrified? No, thoroughly conquered, absolutely. She kissed him, long and slow. Good answer. I have my moments. He was quiet for a bit. Then, we'll get through this, Maggie. Whatever Owen tries, whatever comes, we'll face it standing tall. Together. Always together. Outside, wind sighed through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of coming rain. Another storm approaching, but this time Maggie wasn't afraid. She had a strong house around her, a good man beside her, family ready to fight for her. Owen Darby could bring all the lawyers in Wyoming. She'd stood up to worse than legal threats, and this time, she wouldn't be standing alone. Lucian, I love you. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Love you too. Now sleep. Tomorrow we start fighting back. She closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady under her palm. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight she was safe. Loved, exactly where she belonged. And that was worth defending with everything she had. The confrontation came not with guns or fists, but with papers served on a Tuesday morning while Maggie was reconciling accounts. Marshal Henderson arrived looking apologetic, legal documents in hand. Sorry about this, Mrs. Carter. Just doing my job. Lucian took the papers, jaw tight. We expected this. Judge Thornberry said to tell you he's ready whenever you are. Already got that lawyer from Denver you asked about. The marshal shifted uncomfortably. For what it's worth, most folks in town think Darby's lost his mind. After he left, they gathered in the kitchen, Lucian, Maggie, Eleanor, and Chen, spreading the documents on the table. The claims were even more audacious than expected. Owen alleged not just a promise to sell the North Pastures, but an actual signed agreement dated 2 years prior. When I was still in St. Louis burying Sarah, Lucian said quietly. He claims I signed this while grief-stricken. Eleanor examined the supposed signature with a magnifying glass she'd produced from her medical bag. Decent forgery, but look here. The ink's too fresh. This was written weeks ago, not years. Will that hold up in court? Maggie asked. With the right lawyer and judge, yes. But Owen's brought in someone from back east. Harrison Blackwood. I've heard of him. Specializes in land disputes. Usually wins by grinding opponents down with legal fees. So we fight money with money. Chen said practically, good thing ranch does well. But Maggie had been running the books for months. She knew exactly how much they could afford. And a prolonged legal battle wasn't it. Not without selling cattle at a loss or mortgaging land. I have savings, Eleanor said, reading her expression. 30 years of doctoring builds up funds. We can't take your money. Lucian started. You're not taking. I'm investing in family. Eleanor's tone brooked no argument. Besides, I've been wanting to put Harrison Blackwood in his place for years. Man once defended a hospital that refused to hire women doctors. The next weeks blurred together in a parade of legal meetings, document reviews, and strategic planning. Their lawyer, Michael Brennan, was young but sharp, recommended highly by Judge Thornbury. "The forgery's good but not perfect," he said after examining everything. "And we have witnesses to the original negotiations falling through. Tom Bradley, your foreman, was present. So was John Chen." "But I'm Chinese," Chen pointed out. "Some judges don't accept Chinese testimony." "Judge Thornbury does, and he'll be presiding." Brennan smiled thinly. "Darby's team tried to get a change of venue to Cheyenne, but Thornbury refused, said the alleged crime occurred in his jurisdiction. Small victories, but Maggie would take them. Still, the stress wore on everyone. Lucian grew quieter, spending long hours riding the disputed pastures. Chen cooked increasingly elaborate meals no one had appetite for. Eleanor threw herself into research, corresponding with legal contacts across the West. And Maggie kept the books, watching their savings dwindle as legal fees mounted. 3 weeks before the trial, she made a decision. After Lucian left for the morning, she saddled her horse and rode to town, not to their lawyer's office or the general store, but to the Silver Creek Bank. Edward Morrison, the bank president, received her in his office with obvious curiosity. "Mrs. Carter, how can I help you today?" "I need information about Owen Darby's loans." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "That's confidential, I'm afraid." "I'm not asking for details. Just, is he current on his payments?" The banker studied her carefully. "I shouldn't say anything, but given the circumstances," he pulled out a ledger, consulted it. "Mr. Darby is 3 months behind on his mortgage. We've given him extensions, but patience has limits. What would happen if someone were to buy his debt?" Morrison went very still. "That would be unusual, but legal. The new debt holder could call in the loan immediately if they chose." "And if Owen couldn't pay?" "Foreclosure. Ranch goes to auction." Morrison leaned back. "Mrs. Carter, what are you planning?" "Nothing yet, just exploring options." She stood. "Thank you for your time." She was halfway home when she realized someone was following her, not closely, but matching her pace. She slowed her horse near a grove of cottonwoods, hand moving to the rifle Lucian insisted she carry. But it wasn't a threat that emerged from the trees. It was Emma Carstairs. "Mrs. Carter, I was hoping to catch you alone." "Miss Carstairs, you're a long way from town." "I've been staying with my aunt on the Double B Ranch, close enough to hear things." Emma urged her horse closer. "Owen's getting desperate. He knows the forgery won't hold up in court. Not really. He's planning something else." "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly, but he met with some men last night, rough types from the mining camps. They talked about the trial, about making sure the right verdict came through. Intimidation, or worse." Maggie's blood ran cold. "You need to tell the marshal." "With what proof? It's my word against his. And we know how that went last time." Emma's pretty face was bitter. "But I wanted to warn you, and to apologize, for my part in this. If I hadn't gotten involved with Owen, hadn't made him feel rejected." "His choices aren't your fault," Maggie said firmly. "Any more than they're mine. Owen Darby made himself what he is. Still, be careful, all of you." Emma wheeled her horse. "I'll keep listening. If I hear anything specific." "Thank you." Maggie rode home with new urgency. They gathered again in the kitchen, and she shared Emma's warning. "Hired thugs," Lucian said flatly. "To what threatened the judge attack witnesses." "Or us," Eleanor said. "Make us too scared to show up to court." "Then we need protection." Chen said, "Ranch hands are loyal. They'll help." "Turn the ranch into an armed camp." Maggie shook her head. That's what Owen wants. Make us look dangerous, unreasonable.
Then what do you suggest? Lucian asked.
She took a breath. We buy his mortgage, force foreclosure. End this before it gets to trial.
The room went silent. Then Eleanor laughed, sharp and delighted. Brilliant. Attack his flank while he's focused forward. We don't have that kind of money, Lucian said.
No, but Aunt Eleanor does, and I have an idea about finding more. She looked at Eleanor. Those friends you mentioned, in San Francisco, any of them investors?
Eleanor's eyes lit up.
Several women doctors who've done well, looking for opportunities men's clubs won't offer them. She grinned. Oh, they'd love this, using Owen's own tactics against him.
It's ruthless, Lucian said slowly.
Yes.
Maggie met his eyes.
But he's threatening our home, our life, our future children's inheritance.
I won't sit waiting for hired thugs to appear. I won't let him grind us down with legal fees. We end this now.
That's my girl,
he said softly. Then louder, what do you need?
The plan came together quickly. Eleanor telegraphed her contacts.
Within days, commitments arrived.
Dr. Catherine Walsh, Dr. Mary Bennington, even a wealthy widow named Harriet Stone who simply liked the idea of putting a bully in his place.
Meanwhile, Maggie worked with Morrison at the bank, structuring the deal carefully. Everything legal, everything proper. Owen's debt purchased by a consortium of investors who would call it due immediately. The papers were signed on a Thursday. By Friday morning, Owen knew. He arrived at the LC Ranch near noon, no longer drunk, but stone-cold sober and furious. This time, Lucian met him in the yard, backed by Tom Bradley and 3 ranch hands.
You can't do this,
Owen snarled.
It's not legal.
Completely legal, Michael Brennan said, stepping out from the porch. He'd been reviewing documents with Maggie when Owen arrived. Your mortgage clearly states it can be sold to third parties. The new holders are within their rights to call it due. You're stealing my ranch.
No, Maggie said, joining them.
We're buying your debt. What happens next is up to you. Pay what you owe, or face foreclosure. Your choice.
You know I can't pay.
Then perhaps you should have thought of that before forging documents and hiring thugs. She kept her voice level. Yes, we know about your friends from the mining camps. They've been encouraged to find work elsewhere.
Owen's face went white. You can't prove anything?
Marshall Henderson disagrees. Seems one of your hired men had outstanding warrants. He was quite talkative when arrested. That was a bluff. The men had vanished like smoke when warned off. But Owen didn't know that.
This isn't over,
he said, but the fight had gone out of him.
You can't.
We can, Eleanor said, stepping forward.
Just like you could have honored your promise to my niece, could have helped her when she arrived, could have accepted her choice gracefully. Every step, you chose cruelty. Now you face consequences.
Owen looked around wildly, as if searching for allies. He found only stern faces, even his own ranch hands, who'd accompanied him, stepped back.
1 week,
Brennan said calmly. You have 1 week to pay or vacate. I suggest you use the time wisely. Owen stood there for a moment, looking lost and broken. Then his eyes found Maggie, and for just a second, she saw past the anger to the fear beneath, fear of failure, of humiliation, of being made small in turn.
I loved you, he said quietly. In my way. You were supposed to save me.
No, Maggie said gently.
I was supposed to save myself, and I did.
He turned without another word, mounting his horse and riding away. They watched until he disappeared over the ridge.
Think he'll cause more trouble?
Tom asked.
No, Lucian said. He's done. Man knows when he's beat.
And he was right. Owen Darby left Silver Creek 3 days later, abandoning his ranch to foreclosure, heading east to whatever family would take him. The consortium of women investors bought the property at auction,
planning to divide it into smaller homesteads for women wanting to ranch independently. Poetic justice. Eleanor said the evening they got the news. Land he wanted to use against you will now help women stand tall. They were gathered for dinner. Family, Chen called it. And he was right. Eleanor had extended her stay indefinitely, setting up a small practice in town for women who needed care. The ranch thrived under Maggie's careful management and Lucian's experienced hand. We should celebrate. Chen announced, Big feast. Invite everyone who stood with us. Everyone who matters already here, Lucian said, but he was smiling. Later, as Maggie and Lucian walked by Sarah's grave, something they did together now, honoring the past while building the future, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Any regrets? Lucian asked. No, you... Only that it took so long to find you. He wrapped an arm around her waist. Though maybe we both needed the journey. To be ready. Right on time, she murmured. Right on time, he agreed. They stood together in the fading light, tall and straight and unashamed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Running a ranch always did, but also new joys, Eleanor had mentioned, with professional satisfaction. Certain signs she'd noticed, changes that suggested the Carter family might be growing come spring. But that was tomorrow's announcement. Tonight, Maggie simply stood with her husband on their land, grateful for storms weathered and battles won, for Chen's fierce loyalty and Eleanor's unexpected arrival, for a town that had learned to see her worth, for a man who loved her exactly as she was. She'd traveled so far to find home, through loneliness and rejection, through gossip and spite, but every step had led here. To this moment, to this life built on truth rather than pretense. And it was good. It was so very good. Ready to go in? Lucian asked. Chen's making that roast you love. In a moment, she leaned into him, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Just want to stand here a bit longer. He understood, as he always did. They stood together, no words needed, hearts speaking in the silence. Two tall souls who'd found each other against all odds, proof that sometimes the longest roads led to the best destinations. In the house, lamplight glowed warm and welcoming. Family waited, home beckoned. But for now, for this perfect moment, they simply stood tall together, exactly where they belonged. The end had become a beginning, and the beginning was beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love and courage in the Old West. I hope Maggie and Lucian's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Please share in the comments where you are listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts about this story together. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And if you really want to help more people discover these stories of the American frontier, please hit the hype button to boost this video. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories alive for everyone who loves the romance and adventure of the Wild West. Until our next story, partners, keep standing tall